There's a moment, right before you react, where everything is decided. A split second. Most people never even notice it exists. Someone cuts you off in traffic, and in that sliver of time, your entire day is either saved or destroyed. Someone sends a cold text, and in that same sliver of time, your whole week either stays steady or spirals into anxious thoughts you can't shake. That moment is so small, so fast, that it feels like it isn't even there. But it is. And the people who learn to find it, who learn to live inside it, they become almost impossible to shake. 2,000 years ago, a man in chains figured this out. His name was Epictetus, and he wasn't born into comfort or philosophy. He was born a slave in the Roman Empire, and his leg was broken, some say by his own master, simply out of cruelty. He had every reason to be bitter, broken, and consumed by hatred for the rest of his life. Instead, he became one of the most powerful minds in human history. Not because his circumstances changed. He became powerful because he discovered something most of us spend our entire lives missing. No one, not an emperor, not a master, not fate itself, could actually touch his mind unless he let them. That's what we're going to talk about today. Not some abstract philosophy lecture. The actual, practical, sometimes uncomfortable work of mastering your own mind. The Stoic way. Because you're first, or going to spend more time inside your own head than anywhere else in the entire world. More time than at your job. More time than with your family. And yet most of us never learn how to actually run that space. We just let it run us. Let's start with something most people get completely backwards. We believe peace of mind comes from controlling our circumstances. Get the right job, the right relationship, enough money in the bank, and then, finally, we'll feel calm. But think about how many people you know who got exactly what they wanted and still felt just as anxious, just as restless as before. The promotion came, and within a month, the stress was back wearing a different outfit. This isn't a coincidence. This is what happens when you try to fix an internal problem with an external solution. Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man in the world at the time, wrote something down late at night, not for an audience, just for himself. He wrote that if you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it, and that you have the power to revoke that estimate at any moment. Think about the last time something ruined your mood. Someone said words. Air vibrated, sound hit your ears, and your brain translated it into meaning. You made a mistake, which is just an action that didn't produce the result you wanted. The events themselves are almost always neutral. It's the meaning we assign to them in that split second that turns a neutral event into a wound. This isn't about pretending things don't matter or suppressing emotion. Marcus Aurelius wept. Seneca grieved deeply when he lost people he loved. What made them different wasn't the absence of feeling. It was the presence of a gap between what happened and how they chose to respond. And inside that gap is where your entire life actually gets built. So how do you actually train yourself to live inside that gap? Picture a Roman general during a victory parade, the crowd screaming his name, flowers at his feet, the most celebrated man in the empire. And yet tradition required a slave to stand behind him in that chariot, whispering 4 words over and over. Remember, you are mortal, not to humiliate him, to protect him, because the mind that isn't reminded of reality drifts into illusion. And illusion is where suffering is born. This is the foundation of something called negative visualization. Seneca recommended that before anything important, you spend a few minutes imagining things going wrong, not to scare yourself, to prepare yourself. Most of our anxiety doesn't come from bad things happening. It comes from being blindsided, from believing things are supposed to always go smoothly. But if you've already sat with the possibility of failure, when it happens, you're not shattered. You're standing in a room you've already visited before. Think of a mother whose child is heading off to college. If she never lets herself imagine the empty bedroom, that moment hits her like a wall. But if she's allowed herself calmly to picture that day in advance, something shifts. She's not avoiding pain, she's meeting it early, on her own terms. This is completely different from worrying, which is chaotic and repetitive and resolves nothing. Negative visualization is deliberate. You picture the worst realistic outcome clearly, then ask yourself, could I survive it? Almost every time, the answer is yes. And there's a quiet second gift hidden inside this practice. When you imagine loss, even briefly, gratitude shows up almost instantly. Imagine the people you love most were gone tomorrow. Sit in that for 10 seconds. Now open your eyes and look at your actual life. Suddenly the traffic, the small arguments, the annoying coworker shrink down to almost nothing. But even the most prepared mind can still get pulled off course by something the Stoics considered one of the most dangerous forces a human being will ever face. Not an enemy, not a tragedy, something much quieter. It's called the trap of other people's opinions. Here's a question worth sitting with. How much of your day, right now, today, is spent thinking about how you're perceived? The outfit you chose because of what someone might think. The comment you didn't post because you were scared of the reaction. The achievement you downplayed because you didn't want to seem arrogant. Or the one you exaggerated because you needed someone to be impressed. Epictetus taught something brutally simple about this. He said some things are within our control, and some things are not. And the very root of all human suffering comes from confusing the two. Your effort, your integrity, your reactions, your judgments, these are within your control. Other people's opinions of you, whether they like you, whether they understand you, whether they approve, none of that is within your control. And yet look at how much of our daily emotional energy gets poured into that second category, the one we can never actually manage. Think about a man who spends 15 years climbing the corporate ladder, chasing a title, a corner office, a certain kind of respect from people he doesn't even particularly like. He gets it. And within weeks, the satisfaction fades, because it was never really his goal to begin with. It was borrowed from what he thought other people wanted to see. This happens constantly, in relationships, in career choices, in the way people raise their kids to fit an image instead of a truth. We build entire lives trying to control something that was never ours to control in the first wells, the minds of other people. Epictetus would say this is like trying to control the weather and getting furious every time it rains. Rain doesn't care about your plans, and other people's opinions don't actually care about your worth. They were formed by their own experiences, their own insecurities, their own limited view of you that never once includes the full picture of who you actually are. So what do you actually control? Your intentions, your effort, your honesty, your response when things fall apart. That's the entire list. Everything else, other people, outcomes, timing, luck, health, the economy, belongs to a category the Stoics simply called not up to us. And the moment you stop fighting for control over things that were never yours, something incredible happens. The exhausting mental noise starts to quiet down. This brings us to something the Stoics practiced constantly. Almost like a muscle they trained daily, and it's the thing that ties everything together. It's called the discipline of response. Here's the truth nobody tells you when life gets hard. You will not get to choose most of what happens to you. You didn't choose the family you were born into, the body you have, the year you were born, the mistakes other people made that affected your life before you were even old enough to understand them. Life is going to throw things at you that are completely, entirely outside of your control. But there's one thing, one single thing that remains yours in every single situation, no matter how unfair, no matter how painful. Your response. Think about Viktor Frankl, a man who lived centuries after the Stoics, but embodied everything they taught in the most extreme circumstances imaginable. He survived Nazi concentration camps, losing nearly everyone he loved. Everything was taken from him, his freedom, his family, his possessions, his dignity in the eyes of his captors. And yet he wrote something that echoes Epictetus almost word for word. He said everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms. To choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances. That's not motivational poster language. That's a man who lived through the worst of what humanity is capable of, and still found, inside himself, a space that no one could touch. This is the same discovery Epictetus made in chains. The same discovery Marcus Aurelius made while ruling an empire during plague and war. The circumstances are almost irrelevant. What matters is what you do with the 1 square inch of freedom that's always, always yours. Let's bring this down to earth, because it's easy to admire this in extreme stories and much harder to actually apply it on a random Tuesday. You wake up late. Your coffee spills on your shirt. Your boss sends a passive-aggressive email before you've even had breakfast. Traffic is worse than usual. By 9 a.m., you're already furious, and the day hasn't even really started. Now here's the question. Did any single one of those events actually decide how your day would go? Or did you decide, in each of those small split-second moments, to hand your peace over to something external? This is the practice. Not grand, dramatic transformation, but small, repeated choices, made all day long, every single day. The traffic doesn't care if you're angry. It's not going to move faster because your blood pressure rises. The email doesn't disappear because you spiral over it for 3 hours. All that happens when you hand your peace away to these small daily events is that you lose hours, sometimes entire days, of a life you'll never get back. The Stoics had a practice for this too, something Seneca wrote about doing every single night before bed. He would sit quietly and review his entire day, not to punish himself, but to ask honest questions. Where did I let my peace slip away today? What habit did I give into that I know isn't serving me? Where did I act with integrity, and where did I fall short of the person I actually want to be? This wasn't self-hatred, it was maintenance. The same way you'd check your car's oil or clean a wound so it doesn't get infected. This nightly reflection kept small emotional wounds from festering into bigger ones. Try this tonight. Not tomorrow, not someday, tonight. Before you fall asleep, spend 3 minutes asking yourself those same questions Seneca asked 2,000 years ago. You'll be surprised how much clarity comes from simply naming what happened during your day, instead of letting it all blur together into a vague feeling of stress. Now here's something important to understand, because Stoicism gets misunderstood constantly, and it's worth clearing up before we go further. This isn't about becoming cold or distant or pretending you don't care about anything. It's actually the opposite. The Stoics cared deeply about justice, about their families, about doing meaningful work in the world. What they refused to do was let things outside their control dictate their inner state. There's a massive difference between not caring and not being controlled. You can care intensely about your work and still not collapse when a project fails. You can love someone deeply and still not lose yourself completely when they hurt you. That balance, caring without being consumed, is the entire art of this philosophy. Marcus Aurelius ruled during one of the worst plagues in Roman history, buried his own children, fought wars for most of his reign, and still found time every single night to write reminders to himself about patience, about kindness, about not becoming the very things he despised in his enemies. He wasn't detached from the suffering around him. He was fully present in it and still refused to let it turn him bitter. This is the real goal. Not numbness, not indifference, a steady, grounded presence that can hold both the pain of being human and the peace of knowing. You still have a choice in how you carry it. So where do you actually start? Not with some massive life overhaul tomorrow morning. Start small. Tomorrow, the first time something irritates you, whether it's a comment, a delay, a disappointment, pause for just 1 second before reacting. That's it. 1 second. In that second, ask yourself a single question. Is this actually within my control? If it's not, practice letting it move through you instead of gripping onto it. If it is within your control, then act, calmly and deliberately, instead of reacting out of impulse. Do this once a day for a week, and you'll start to notice the gap Epictetus talked about beginning to widen. Do it for a month, and it starts to become instinct instead of effort. This is not a philosophy you master overnight. It's not something you read once and suddenly become unshakable forever. It's a practice, the same way exercise is a practice, the same way any skill worth having takes repetition to actually build. The people you admire most, the ones who seem calm under pressure, the ones who don't seem rattled by criticism or setbacks, they aren't different from you at some fundamental level. They simply started practicing this gap earlier, or more consistently, than everyone around them. That's genuinely the entire secret. There's no shortcut, no hack, no single video that will instantly rewire your mind. But there is a starting point, and it's today, right now, with the very next thing that tries to steal your peace. Because here's the truth, this entire philosophy points back to, again and again. You are not going to control most of what happens in your life. The economy will do what it does. People will disappoint you sometimes, even the ones who love you. Your body will age, plans will fall apart, and things you worked hard for will occasionally slip through your fingers anyway. That's not pessimism, that's just reality. And pretending otherwise is what actually causes so much of our suffering. But inside all of that uncertainty, there remains 1 square inch of ground that's entirely yours. Your judgment, your response, your choice, in every single moment, of who you're going to be, regardless of what's happening around you. That's what Epictetus discovered in chains. That's what Marcus Aurelius discovered while ruling an empire falling apart around him. And that's what's still available to you, right now, in whatever situation you're currently facing. Not because your circumstances will suddenly become easy, but because you finally stop looking for peace in places that were never going to give it to you. If this helped you see something differently today, even just a little, do one simple thing before you go. Hit subscribe, because there's a lot more of this waiting for you. Real tools, real philosophy. Nothing fluffy, nothing fake. Like this video if it gave you even 1 moment of clarity. and share it with someone in your life who's carrying more than they should be carrying alone. Because somewhere out there, someone needs to hear exactly what you just heard. And the smallest share from you might be the exact thing that reaches them at the exact right moment. Until next time, remember, you don't need to control the world around you. You just need to remember what's actually yours.